This week, Emmet and Kumar discuss Gou Tanabe's manga adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
This is Emmet.
And this is Kumar.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to another episode of Deconstructing Comics with Emmet and Kumar in my living room.
Again.
It's becoming a thing.
Yeah, love it.
I hope you're appreciating it because, it's improvement on the tinniness of the Skype phone call.
Yes, for sure.
You know, and then I have all sorts of issues with recording via Skype where it's like I get this sound file in the end and it's like this is very tinny and I can hear all the ambient noise. And listeners, I do apologize if you can hear construction works going on in the background. I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about Gou Tanabe's H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness.
Yep.
And I suggested we talk about this because I'm a bit of a Lovecraft head, and you've got a lot more experience in manga than I do.
Yeah, but I was a Lovecraft head for sure.
All right.
In the 90s.
Yeah.
It's like one of the nerdiest things you can do is liking Lovecraft or Philip K. Dick because neither of them could really write, but they were both visionaries.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you have to get past the writing, the styling into the content. It's a really nerdy state of mind you have to be in. And certainly I had read a lot because I had these big hardcovers, but I have not read At the Mountains of Madness. It's one of the ones, and I think maybe it's his longest, and it was
in a novella, yeah.
It was a novella, and it was published like separately, so it doesn't often show up in the little anthologies and stuff you get of the best of or whatever, because it's so long. So it's like the one Lovecraft that I'm not familiar with. And it's been a long time, so I don't even really remember a lot of the other stories.
Yeah. Well, my background with Lovecraft is I'm not a huge fan.
Right.
I've read all of it.
Right, interesting.
I've read a lot of stuff about him.
Right.
And a lot of the reasoning for that is because there are so many writers that we've been exposed to coming up as, if you're interested in horror, if you're interested in fantasy, have clearly a debt to Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And particularly comics as well. Like the mark of Lovecraft in comics is huge.
Yeah. From
like Grant Morrison's The Invisibles to Alan Moore's frequent riffing on Lovecraft and most upsettingly Neonomicon, which is still burnt into my brain and I refuse to read it again. But Lovecraft is clearly a huge influence in all of these comic book professionals. So I was like, okay, what's this about? I read his stuff. I think some of his smaller stories I much prefer.
Yeah.
Like Color Out of Space.
Yeah.
I quite like that one. Yeah. And Richard Stanley's just done a movie of that with Nicolas
Cage. Very curious about this.
I really want to watch that.
Because that's interesting because that's the one that reading it as a story I remember very clearly because it was like there's no way to visualize this in a comic book or on film. And I find it's really interesting doing this comic as well by Gou Tanabe because I just find visualizing Lovecraft is very difficult because it's more about the horror that a person feels at seeing a thing which should not exist in our world. And as soon as you draw that or make a model of it, the thing exists in our world.
Yes.
So
that's the crux of his horror. It's the unimaginable thing.
It's unimaginable.
Or even unutterable. You can't even describe it.
That's right. And even the descriptions of Cthulhu, okay, fine, but it's almost become standardized. And it's really funny because, my son is 12 and he knows about Cthulhu. Cthulhu's in every kid's video game. There's some little cute version of it that shows up and he kind of knows about it. And he kind of asked me about, I don't know why he asked me about Lovecraft when he was like younger, like 9 or 8 or something. And I kind of described the stories to him. And so he was kind of aware of it before him. And then he started seeing, he said, Dad, look at this. There's a little cute little Cthulhu in this video game or something like this. And that kind of visualization of the kind of octopus mouth and the big bat wings is... It's the way Lovecraft describes it, but it's become very standardized.
Yeah. And I think we're going to get into this with this discussion of Gou Tanabe's book, because the story ends at a juncture just before this volume ends, with part 2 coming, I think, very shortly.
December, I think.
Where we're going to be getting the beasties in actual proper, it sort of ends as the lake party has been discovered.
Right.
And I find it very interesting because, again, that sort of leads into Lovecraft's whole idea of expectation and tantalization. But the showing of the thing is the one element he avoided.
Yeah.
Because as a literary stylist, he understood that it's more upsetting to let the reader imagine what this is than to actually show what this is. And I've always had a big problem with those artist interpretations of the giant tentacled Cthulhu beastie with bat wings coming out of the Atlantic Ocean or whatever.
Yeah.
I really don't like that because it's like you've made it literal.
Yeah.
And what Gou Tanabe does here is he sort of plays to Lovecraft's concretized prose, all these descriptions and this beautiful art, like drawing it in. But I don't think he's going to spoil the reveal the way some Lovecraft interpretations have. This is just based on what I've read so far.
Yeah, I think I agree. We do see some of the monsters.
Yes.
Not fossilized like other... we think we'll get to the art, but...
it's kind of Geiger-esque. It's kind of like when the Nostromo finds...
Well, when you were describing not seeing the monster, I was thinking of the Xenomorph in the first Alien movie, because it's only on screen for 1 minute and 21 seconds. In that whole movie, do you ever get shots of the alien? So we're going to... That's kind of nuts and bolts horror. But to me, what was interesting about At the Mountains of Madness, which I had not read, I've only read it through this comic, is how much... all horror after it seems to be... A lot of it's based on that. Like, there's the hubris of the investigators. The scientists who want to find out more about this thing, and they're going deeper and deeper. And I don't know how it's structured in the novella, but in this comic, we see the carnage that the monsters have caused first. So there's a prologue in which you see all these massacred bodies. And then we get the story of how we got there. And so now we've got 300 pages almost of very little monstrous stuff. Nothing almost. And they even find these alien-like creatures in this cave in Antarctica. And there's still nothing happens. There's no wake up after 300 pages. But you're filled with this kind of building dread about, no, don't go. Then when the scientists are like, we need to go deeper. We need to investigate. So we need to cut this creature open and see what the organs are. That's straight out of John Carpenter's The Thing. Like, he riffed that to death. Now, I don't know how close that was to Lovecraft's original, but when I read that, I was like, holy moly. It's in Antarctica. They're cutting open the thing. They're doing an autopsy on the, all that stuff. And I really, even Jaws, it reminded me of almost the opposite of Jaws, because there's like the mayor's like, we're not shutting down the beach.
Sure.
And here it's like Lake. But I felt really sympathetic for Lake, who's the biologist on the team, who's like, whoa, there's some weird biology down here. We need to go deeper into the caves and figure out what it is. And I was like, we know because we've seen the prologue, but there's no reason for them to suspect anything worse, except... 2/3 into it, people start mentioning, we read this book at the university library called a Necronomicon, and this kind of reminds me of that goofy, silly stuff, but we're scientists, of course, and let's just, I know it's on our minds, but let's just put it out of our minds and just keep going.
Yeah.
So I was quite sympathetic to him, unlike, say, the mayor in Jaws or whatever.
Sure.
You're like, get people off the beach,
Well, that's the Lovecraft ethos right there, which is that if you actually struggle to know what is out there, if you try to confront the unknown aspects of this universe, you will die, you will suffer, and you will bring tragedy upon yourself and everyone close to you.
Yes.
And the general ethic of Lovecraft seems to be stay in ignorance, do not go outside. Do not try to go beyond the bonds of what makes humanity.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the things I have a problem with him, because I don't so much have an issue with the cosmic insignificance of the human race. I think that's a really fruitful point of it. But he also seems to be dwelling on this notion of tribal purity, and that's where I get...
Oh, sure.
And it leads into the racism, and that's where I start going, okay, what you're actually saying is we shouldn't associate with others who are not like us. That's what you're trying to tell me in this very heightened metaphor.
Yeah.
So that's where I have an issue with Lovecraft, and I think anyone adapting Lovecraft needs to confront that aspect of his work. I think Alan Moore has done that very successfully in a lot of his, particularly Providence, which I think is one of the best things he's ever done. But other than that, a lot of interpretations of Lovecraft go for that cheap reveal, as I was saying before. But I am very interested in how people adapt him.
Yeah.
And I think Gou Tanabe, this is possibly one of the best, like, straight-up adaptations. Because there's something about his art style and something about the manga aesthetic that really complements the reserve and the sort of calculated prose of Lovecraft. They sit side by side really well.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because the manga-esque aesthetic, because I think it's very outside the sphere of your normal manga style. It's very photorealistic.
We're going to get into that with Lake, aren't we?
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll get to that. But
what I meant was the sort of ambiguous gendered of the men as well. The soft features, that seems very
but
typical.
Everybody has a different face.
No, that's true.
And there's no shortcuts. And it reminded me of Jiro Taniguchi. We covered this series that I translated called Summit of the Gods and the Drawings of the Mountains. And, you know, how key is that? You can't cut corners with this stuff in this book. And I must say, usually I'm like, oh, it's better to read the physical book than the ebook. But if you can read this comic on a large computer screen, it is awesome. So, especially at the beginning, when you get through this prologue and they find the carnage of these bodies that have been ripped apart, and they don't know what's happened. They're in Antarctica. And then you get these 3 2-page spreads in a row. And if you're on a computer and you're just clicking the mouse and the pages are turning, there's almost a cinematic effect where you get the mountains, and then you get this Antarctica and the planet Earth. And I read it on my computer screen, and it was so big, and really, and then you click it again, and you get this huge title at the Mountains of Madness, white on black, and it's chilling. It's really chilling. I don't know if you get that from the physical copy, but reading it on screen, it was really pretty amazing. So you can't cut corners, that kind of stuff, and I think it's really interesting too with the art. Like I don't know if it was a flaw in the art, but like when they find fossils and Lake is like, this is not geological, this is biological. And I'm looking at this drawing going, I don't know what he's seeing in here. Like, you know what I mean?
Yes, but again, doesn't that speak to his expertise and that he's almost halfway gone from our understanding of the world? Like, he has insights we don't have. And that's leading him on in his madness. That makes his passion even more inscrutable for us, the reader.
Right.
I mean, what's he seeing? It looks like a piece of shale. It looks like shale rock.
It just looks like ordinary, as far as we can tell. But he's
telling us, no, this is biological.
And then they get to the Black Mountains.
Yep, which are stunning. They're incredible.
Beautiful drawings. And whenever you get those 2-page spreads, it's like, holy moly. But then they're talking about, there's like kind of structures in there. And it's kind of hard to see the structures the way he's drawn them. Yeah. It's just kind of on the edge of your awareness almost, that there's some of them that look a little kind of tower-like. And then that's conflated with these polar mirages, which is, I looked this up, I Googled photos of it, and it's a weird, freaky effect where the sky is mirroring the land somehow. And
you can imagine, like, Lovecraft is, because he was obsessed with Antarctic exploration. And you're talking about the time where people are still talking about Shackleton as a recent event.
Right.
And he's introducing these elements into the story. And he's probably read, but he's not left his home. He's not gone anywhere close to these climates, but he's imagining it. So he's drawing all this stuff from magazine articles and explorers'
there's a
notes.
quote from Cook about it. Now, was that in Lovecraft's story, or do you think that was... Do you remember, or was that put in here?
I actually meant to reread it last night. I don't want to commit to that. I'm not sure.
Because that's a really interesting quote from Cook about how it will never be explored. Antarctica will never... It's inaccessible. And even if anyone does, there will be nothing to be gained by humanity.
The entire style of the book itself is epistolary. So a lot of it is him trying to convince you that this is a genuine academic report on a genuine exploration. And that this professor is trying to warn his peers, do not go back to this place. So a lot of it has citations. Yeah. A lot of it has these dated journal entries. Like, it's very much this dry, and that's kind of why it's not one of my favorite stories of his. It's this mounting evidence that this really, really happened. This is a real thing. And then we get to, and there's also giant gelatinous cubes that eat people. Which is a great reveal, but at the same time, it's sort of it's exhausting just to get to that point.
But don't you think that's true of a lot of Lovecraft's work? Is that like you were saying about the horror of knowing what this, you should not explore these unknowns because the horror is too much for the human brain. Is not able to process it. I always feel like that's not what you get when you're reading that book. It's when you close the book and you think about it, and then it's like, whoa. And it's a bit like that with Philip K. Dick too. It's when you're reading it, it's like, okay, and then you close it and you're like, maybe I'm being watched.
Yeah. And it's very good that you've associated those two writers as well, because yes, you're right. They both have this they're giving you the ingredients, and your mind unconsciously assembles them. But also in terms of their public repute and their presence in the pop cultural landscape, they have jumped from our 90s heyday today. They are suddenly everywhere. Everything's Dickian now. We live in a Philip K. Dick world. We live in this paranoid space. Everything's Lovecraftian now. And suddenly everyone's obsessed with race and this notion of nationhood, and all these things are linked back to him. And this idea of being proud of your ignorance, like be proud to be ignorant. That's a very Lovecraftian thing too. Like, you stay in your little bubble. So I feel as if these two writers have authored our time in a way. And
for sure. Yeah.
It really bothers me. And that's why I like to push back against both of them in certain ways. Because I'm just going, I admire some of the things they did. I admire their breadth of imagination. I really dislike their morals. I really don't like their...
I support Dick 100%. Well, not 100%, but I think he really...
He was an abusive creep.
Yeah, for sure. But in the books, I mean, the idea of... false reality, I think is really prophetic. Interesting that Tanabe, according to the credits, has previously adapted Gorky and Chekhov, and then somehow has pivoted over to doing Lovecraft adaptations.
But there's a similar degree of depth.
I was wondering what the connection is there too. Yeah,
it's sort of this. Here you've got this manga artist who's going to go, okay, I'm going to realize the depth of the prose styling with my art. And I cannot stress enough just how much I love the style of the art and the depth of it and the detailing of it. Even I was staring at, is it the Dyerson Party? Is that the name?
Dyer,
yeah. Dyer is leaving the site. They're walking to the Antarctic, and the ship is behind them. And the rigging of the ship is in detail. Framing the panel, and this is incredible.
Is that the shot where he's looking at the coastline of the city? I stared at this panel too. So they're leaving for Antarctica, and it's almost like a cage between him and civilization. Like it's behind bars that are inaccessible. Yeah, for sure. I stared at that too, twice. Both times I read it.
It's just I think this is an extraordinary graphic novel just to browse through. Just literally just look at panels, just take them in. And consider the amount of work Tanabe's putting into it. Like the amount of craftsmanship here. Is amazing. I
do wonder, like, I've never heard of Tanabe before. I do wonder how many assistants he's got doing the Blacks Forum and other stuff. I did wonder how often these kind of, like Taniguchi, I think, didn't have any assistants, which is unusual for a manga artist. But I think sometimes when they're not making as much money, it's usually just their wife. They're filling in the blacks or something like that if they are not big money makers. I don't know how popular he is or anything like that. Yeah, but I did find... So, one thing he does is, some manga artists do this, is they don't draw tails on the balloons. Now, this made some sections of it pretty confusing.
Because we both read it digitally. So again, you've got that slight annoyance. I don't think manga really works for me in the comicsology reader. Like, I have trouble with it. And I did have difficulty telling what I should be reading at certain points.
Well, I knew what I should be reading, but I was like, who is speaking? Now, Zach Davison is a top translator. He's one of the top guys in the industry.
Yeah, meant to credit him. Yeah, Zach Davison's translated this for Dark Horse. And Steve Dutra. Yeah, he's doing the lettering.
Yeah, and he's lettered a ton of books that I've worked on. And he's a top guy too. There are no balloon tales. Now, they don't touch up the art anymore. This is the thing they used to go through in the production in the 80s and 90s when you would translate a manga, you'd flip the art and you'd make any little corrections and stuff. So they haven't added any balloon tales. Now, when you're translating, so in Japanese, for example, males can refer to themselves in 3 ways. There's 3 different words to say the word I. One is kind of like a polite form, one is more neutral, one is a bit cruder. And you can often tell who's speaking by which pronoun they're using.
Yep.
Or the way they refer to other people. That's all gone. So sometimes you're like, okay, who's saying this and who's saying that? And there are some confusing moments. There's also like a scene where Lake is in the plane. They're going over, they see something amazing, and they say, the Lake party and the Dyer party have separated. Lake's like, screw you guys, I'm going to explore, I'm finding this weird biological stuff, I'm going to look deeper. Screw you, I'm going to go off on my own. He takes his own team, they're in a plane, and they see something amazing. They maybe in the mountains for the first time, and they're like, radio the coordinates to Lake. It's got to be a mistake. They must have meant radio the coordinates to Dyer.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this like, what?
Yeah.
And there's another scene where they've pulled these weird creatures out of this cave. They've dissected them. A storm's coming up. They're like, we need to batten down the hatches. And then we get the scene of Gedney, who is a graduate student who's come on the expedition, out in the snow.
Yep.
Somebody calls out to him, Gedney.
Yeah.
He says, Dyer? Now, Dyer's nowhere near there. He's on the other side of the continent.
I was going to bring this up, too.
He's like, Dyer? And then whoever's in the plane, I guess, he sees the plane, and then he's like, don't come any closer. Well, I'm like, okay, why would he think it's Dyer? Why would he call out to him and then say, don't come any closer?
Makes, like, knowing what happens to Gedney, that makes less sense. In the story, his eventual fate is very lonely. And so that sequence made no sense to me. I didn't know what it added to it. I wasn't quite clear what was happening.
I didn't know.
And Dyer does go looking for him in a plane. Like, that is,
yes, that's
that
right.
is part of the story.
That's right.
But in that sequence, it seemed as if he felt he was infected with something, or he felt like it was almost the way he's saying stay away. Right. It was like, I've got something, or and I could be making something up here, and this could be Tanabe maybe introducing a new element. The Shoguts are able to assume any form.
Oh.
They can look like anything.
Oh, okay.
So if they choose to. But I think that was more functional. It was more a case of if they're building a city, they can become whatever they need to be. But maybe it's like your John Carpenter The Thing reference. Maybe it's like the ending. It's like the ending of The Thing, where it's like, well, which one of us is real?
Right.
So maybe Gedney's like, all right, no, stay away from me. I don't trust anybody.
Right.
But I'm just pulling it out of my hat because I honestly don't know what was going on that page. And it really confused me rereading this quickly. I did a quick reread and I got to that page and going, yeah, what happened with this?
Yeah.
Because I know what happens to him. And this is not familiar to me from the story.
So this was a question, is how close is it to the book? And
yep.
You haven't read it in a while, I guess. So
yeah, I was going to reread it again for this. I've just run out of time. But one of the reasons that I hesitated to reread again is because it was just a tough one for me to read when I did read it. Okay. Just the exhausting detailing of the epistolary style. And what's interesting about it as a novella is it's very it's something of a homage to Edgar Allan Poe's the Gordon Pym novel.
Yes, yeah.
Arthur Gordon Pym, and that is a very exciting book. I really being pulled in by that and really feeling it was there was a lot going on in it, and there's a lot of fear and loneliness, and Poe is a great stylist as well, and I just came away from that book going, this is great. And then I I read At the Mountains of Madness, and I was going, oh, it's the Tekeli, and this idea of there's this hidden space in the Antarctic, and there's all these things going on there that carrying on parallel to our world, and we've been unaware of them. And if you go there, you're in danger. That, in broad strokes, that's kind of what it's about. And it just feels like a sort of paler echo of Poe's story.
Right.
But this is the much more dominant story. And I think one of the issues I have with Lovecraft as well is, like Stephen King to a degree, he's pulled in all these influences, and now he's centralized the focus of these influences in himself and supplanted them.
Yeah.
You know, like how many people who read Lovecraft go on to read Clark Ashton Smith, who's one of my favorites, or Lord Dunsany, you know, or Arthur Machen. Like, I know some people who do because Lovecraft, you know, to his credit, recommended people do that.
Yeah.
Like you saying, oh, I've read all these guys, these are great, read them. But how many people do that? How many people complete that journey and just stick with Lovecraft and then just take what he's taking, which I feel is at times a pale imitation of what went before him.
Sure.
And
there's a whole cottage industry of Lovecraft.
Yeah. Very literal Lovecraftians. Like the August Derleth sort of introduction of, okay, let's bring some context to these gods and evil gods, and let's bring an ethical morality to these creatures. Just I think even really screwed it up.
It wasn't Lovecraft himself. He encouraged people to write kind of Cthulhu mythos stories to kind of create almost a hoax around it.
Well, it's similar to the approach to this story, where it's like, this is a real thing. These are real stories. This is a real reportage from the Antarctic. It's like his the story he did for Houdini as well. It's like, I am Houdini, and I did this, and I went to ancient Egypt.
But isn't it interesting that element is kind of removed when you take out, like, we do get a bit of the journal entries and stuff and letters here, but it's more of just a fictional narrative that we're inside.
Yeah, and because of that, we can shock the reader with that opening sequence. Yeah. Which I don't believe is from the original story.
Well, that's interesting, because I think it would have been a lot of nothing going on, almost, if you didn't know. And those pages are horrific. Yeah. The carnage is, like, wow, shocking. So, yeah, I guess he's made some changes that make it more palatable and scarier.
It's very
scary.
What?
There was another sequence because there's so much attention to the mood and the pacing and the scope of the panels. He's really, arranged things in a like this needs to have 2 pages. This needs a full page. There's so much silence, like, by which I mean, there's no sound effects. So there's lots of panels with no dialogue, but every time you see those planes flying over, you can hear the planes flying over.
Because it's got atmosphere.
Yes. Yeah. It's so atmospheric. And there's a panel I love. So Lake has gone off on his own, and he sent Gedney, his graduate student, to dynamite this cave and go in and search it. Gedney goes in, he finds something. He comes back, he radios. And he radios Lake back at the camp. He's like, you need to get out here immediately. And Lake says, why? And then you turn the page and you get the chapter title, which is The Elder Things. And it's so perfect. And there's so many perfect moments like that where you just get the full black page, The Elder Things. Yeah. And it's like, oh, shit, here we go. Yeah. And there were a few moments like that where it was like, where you turn to get the chapter title, and the chapter title is like The Bombshell. And that bombshell is like, oh, it's more building up of, ramping up of all this tension that's happening and bad stuff. Yeah.
I think there's also occasional flashes of cheeky humor from Tanabe as well. Because the one I wanted to mention, and given that this has been translated and published by Dark Horse, I thought it was interesting that the party, because they're from Miskatonic University, the logo of Miskatonic University looks like the BPRD logo to me. Like it's,
Yes.
BPRD, which of course owes so much to Lovecraft.
We should have mentioned him, Mignola, right off the back too. Yeah.
Big Lovecraftian. But yeah, I just saw that and I was going, okay, there's a little nod, I think. And I've read about Tanabe's also adapted more Lovecraft. I think it's also been published by Dark Horse, which is the Hound and other stories. Right. So it's the shorter Lovecraft stories, and I will be curious to read that, just to see how he handles that succinct horror of Lovecraft in his shorter form.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine how he would handle the pacing, because so much of this is like I actually need 3 2-page spreads to pull this off, that kind of stuff. And the mountains every time they're foreboding.
Yeah.
They're black, and he just didn't cut any corners with it. There's another scene that confused me, that would actually remind me, where Gedney is pulling the creatures out of the cave. And there's a scene where he seems kind of shocked by something, and then he looks down, and it looks like a tentacle has been dragging on the ground off of the sled.
Okay.
And then in the next panel, he's got this look, and I can't tell if he's relieved or...
Right.
What? Yeah. There's a few sequences that are...
So you feel maybe if you read the story, you would have more context?
I do, yeah. Okay. For those bits. I was like, oh, there's something here that I've... Yeah, the whole Gedney, Dyer calling the Gedney in the snow thing.
That makes no sense. I mean, unless
if he had said lake, if it was a mistake,
yep,
like the other mistake with the Lake Dyer switch, if he had said lake, that would have made, it would have been the carnage happening for some reason, and Lake saying, don't come near, I'm being pulled apart by this thing.
That makes less sense.
Well...
Coming up, a certain celebrity who turns up as the model for one character and why it works, and much more. First, thanks to all our supporters at patreon.com/deconcomics, more classic episodes of Deconstructing Comics have been unlocked, all the way back to episode 46, and I'm releasing them at the rate of one per week in reverse order. This week I'll be republishing episode 83 from July 9th, 2007, in which I interviewed Dale Wilson of Dwap Productions, an indie publisher in Los Angeles that has published some work by one Mulele Jarvis. The classic episodes can be found on our Facebook and Twitter feeds by clicking on the earliest months listed on the left sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com or in publicly available posts on our Patreon page. Check out all our goals and help us reach them at patreon.com/deconcomics.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Yeah, I don't follow it at all. Like, unless there's going to be a reveal in the second volume that establishes the context of that scene.
It might be.
I don't know what's happening, and the more each time you bring it up, the more bothered I get by it, because it's just going, wait, no, that's not how the story goes. But look, adaptation is a fluid conversion of one story from one medium to the other. But the reason why I'm getting hung up on it so much is because so much of this feels so true to Lovecraft, and I talked before about that sort of austere, calculated approach that Tanabe has taken to the art, and the fact that all the detailing is so solid of the elements around these creatures, these human characters in this lost landscape, that it just feels so opposite to Lovecraft and his idea of we are lost and alone in this vast, unthinking, uncaring universe. And that just, I really like it.
Yeah. The art kind of reminded me of Wrightson's Frankenstein artwork.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the level of explosive detail. Like, there's always that image of the monster holding Dr. Frankenstein by the collar in the lab with all the jars and every little bit on there. Which also reminded me of I don't know if it was Dark or somebody recently put out a Junji Ito, who is unlike Tanabe, who I don't know, Ito is a giant of horror manga. And is well known even in the West, and he did an adaptation of Frankenstein. And that came out pretty recently, and that cleaved very close to the book. And that's why I kind of wondered if it was almost a cultural thing to try to stick close. Adaptations are rare in manga. So I kind of felt coming in that it was going to be it must be close to the book. I mean, but now I'm wondering, I mean, even was the Lovecraft this violent? Like,
yeah, I think Alan Moore picked up on this with Neonomicon. I don't even like saying it.
Right.
He picked up on there's a lot of things that go unsaid which still are clearly in reference to gross barbarity, like absolute cruelty, total evil.
Right.
And the dissection of the Lake team it would be described in a sentence.
Yeah, right.
Okay? But then Tanabe has to show it.
Yes.
And that's where I feel his approach really works, because I can easily see, as I said before, I can easily see another artist just going for this gory reveal, whereas this has that sort of, it's cold meat on the ground in the Antarctic. That's
Lake's face is on the ground. Lake his corpse is sitting up, his hand is in one place, and his face is elsewhere.
This is how Tanabe approaches it. He just gives it this objective sheen of... And then, as you were saying before, it stays with you, and then afterwards you think on it and you go, oh my God, that's horrific.
I found myself lingering on the words in those scenes too. Especially the second time when the story loops back around and they come to the Lake team.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd written down the words, but he describes the way they've been dissected.
Yep.
And it's a bit clinical. And Dyer's the one, he has a shocked look on his face. And did I mention that, Tanabe draws everyone's face differently.
Yeah.
He has a pretty shocked look on his face, but they're all kind of, nobody's super upset.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's vomiting.
No, they're shocked.
They're shocked.
Their eyes are open wide.
There's a great sentence about it too, where he says, the extent of my imagination could not describe, or something like that. He said he didn't use the word unimaginable. It was actually well phrased about my imagination did not extend far enough to describe I think to find the reason for what had happened, or describe what process could have caused this to occur, or whatever. It was really. I did find I was lingering on those words a lot as well. Maybe I was trying not to look at the pictures. It was chilling. It was very like an autopsy almost. The descriptions of
exactly and these are scientists, and now they're up against an intelligence that's greater than theirs, and it's treating them like lab animals.
Right.
Like that's.
Well, this is a great thing because he describes it. He's come in. He's found these bodies. So Lake has set up this tent in order to do an autopsy on one of the creatures.
Yep.
And that's kind of the last we see of them. And then Dyer's team comes up after this huge storm a couple days later, and everyone's dead. And he goes into the tent, which had been set up for autopsies, and he describes them having been vivisected, or not dissected as if in autopsy.
Yep.
It's almost obvious to him that that's what they've done, because the bodies are up on these hooks and stuff, and they've been pulled apart. I guess methodically he can tell, maybe, even though he's the geologist of the team. Yeah, it's really, really chilling and horrific, I think,
Well, again, I think we've alluded to this a couple of times, so let's get stuck into it. Gou Tanabe makes the choice to depict one is Professor Lake as actor Benedict Cumberbatch.
Sure, especially the first panel.
It's
first
incredible.
time you see him.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The first time I was like, whoa. You turn the page, you're like, that's Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah.
And it's not as pronounced through the rest of the book, but certainly that...
One member of the team also looks to me a little like Dave Anthony, but I think he's an American comedian who hosts the Dollop podcast.
Okay.
But I think that's unintentional. Okay. He just happens to be, a somewhat plump Irishman.
Lake is even dressed like Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes.
He has the coat.
The coat, yeah. At the first time we meet him.
Does he even have a scarf? I think he has a scarf too.
I think we might be imagining that because he looks so much like Cumberbatch.
Got it here.
Yeah.
Because, and I know there is a Sherlock manga, which is...
I'm sure that show is well known. They love Sherlock Holmes in Japan. I'm sure they get that.
I've got it here. So, it's actually closer to the television show. So he's got an unbuttoned top shirt.
Yeah.
And he's wearing a vest and a fancy coat. And he's even posing slightly with his hand in his pocket, like turning to camera almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, his character, Lake, is hubristic, as you said. He's arrogant. He's focused on his goals. He just wants to accomplish this greater knowledge that's just within his grasp.
You can't blame him, almost.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, the setting of it, the temporal setting, because he's like, look, other teams are going to be here. This place is going to be flooded with explorers. This is our chance. We need to explore it now.
Yeah.
And again, I don't blame him for a second. And Dyer admits later that we all came here looking for romantic adventure. This is what we call ourselves scientists, but we really wanted kind of the fame and the adventure of it.
Yeah. But I kind of feel that choice then for Tanabe to base him visually on Benedict Cumberbatch, particularly Sherlock Benedict Cumberbatch, works really well because in that version of Sherlock, he is this spectrumy, just focused on achieving his outcomes, does not care about other people, does not really understand why he should care about other people, treats people as things.
Yeah, right.
And the way Lake sacrifices his team and he's sending them into these, immediate danger.
There's one scene, I don't even think it's the creatures, because my feeling is, put yourself in the situation, there's no reason to assume these things are alive or anything bad's going to happen to you. You just found this amazing thing.
Right.
There's a scene where they're trying to cross like not as big, it's not as big as a ravine or a gorge, but there's this kind of terrain that they have to cross. It's difficult. They put down a ladder and they have to go across.
Yep.
And there's an accident. And one of the dogs is injured and one dog is dead. And he's just like, leave him. Let's go. Let's keep going.
Yep.
That's kind of the scene where it was the Jaws-like hubris of, he's pushing too hard, too far. I think he took some of Dyer's planes. Maybe he took 3 of the 4 planes even.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Wow. So, again, in this story, I can kind of understand, if it had been told without the prologue, you'd be like, look, this guy's found this awesome biological specimen.
Yeah.
I would understand why he would do that. And even as Dyer says about the adventure and stuff, so it's totally psychologically believable why he would do it. And it's not like in the horror movie where the person's running upstairs in the house instead of running out the front door when the slasher's there. I mean, it's not like they know something is wrong at all. I don't think did they even know at the moment of their deaths? We don't know that anything was going to go wrong. There was no indication. There were no what are all these corpses doing here? There's nothing like that. There was no warning. Except for he had some inklings of the Necronomicon and he saw these things.
They've read the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
Again, this is Lovecraft sort of concretizing his fantasy. Saying, no, it's actually a text. All these academics know it. It's in the Miskatonic Library. They're all aware of it. So there is this idea of knowledge as a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
because there's even a point where Dyer says, I wish I hadn't read that.
Yeah.
And I wish that what's he called? There's some guy that's an expert in mythology or something. I wish I'd never spoken to him, he says at one point in his journals.
Yeah. Because these characters reappear in different stories. Like Dyer then is in a later story, which is set in Australia. There's all these sort of cross currencies going on in Lovecraft's writing, and part of that leads into that idea you mentioned before, where he asked all his devotees to continue, get the ball rolling still, tell your story, tell your Cthulhu mystery, and I'm at the moment I'm reading more related Lovecraftian stories. I'm curious about other writers who've taken on the Lovecraft idea, just to see, is there something in here that is, when you cross-pollinate with another writer, can you actually get something really interesting out of the Lovecraft ingredients?
Yeah.
And as I speak, I'm slowly booting up this. So at the moment, I'm reading Demiurge by Michael Shea.
Okay.
Michael Shea is probably how you pronounce it, which is his collection of Lovecraftian stories. And I'm reading this story at the moment, which is set in the 80s, and I think it's LA, and the main character is a sex worker, and there's a creepy dude on the street opposite her, and she's having all these sort of carnal dreams about this guy, and it's slowly emerging that I think he may be a shoggoth, like he's pretending to be a man, and there's almost this pheromonal attraction to him, even though he's clearly monstrous. There's something wrong with him. And Lovecraft famously, not a lot of writing about sex, so this Shea is trying to actually introduce that.
Yes,
but still in a very twisted way. I don't know where the story is going quite yet. Maybe I will be very upset by the end of it, because certainly everything I've just described is going, well, you got a bunch of balls in the air and they're going to drop horribly. Yeah. But I am interested in people taking this Lovecraft Imaginarium and saying, all right, where can we go in this space? Yeah. Again, Tanabe, just his detailing of the Antarctic space, the mountains. I keep going back to the mountains.
Yeah, for sure.
The instrumentation, the tools these people use is very detailed. I love it. And then the characters have these soft features. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was referring to at the start of our conversation when I said, well, there's some typical manga elements here, because I have a limited exposure to manga. Sure. But at the same time, I've noticed this. The facial detail is not very strong a lot of the time.
Well, it's what did Scott McCloud call it? Masking.
Yeah.
So it's picked up from Tintin pretty much, where the environment is very realistic, and the face of the character is two dots for eyes, so that you can kind of project. Now, he doesn't draw like that. He draws very realistic faces, but there's not a lot of as much detail in the faces. Yeah. But you can project yourself into there.
Yeah. Like Dyer has a beard. Lake looks like Benedict Cumberbatch. Everyone else is just white dude.
Yeah, you can kind of tell them apart, though. He does draw expressions really well, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. You do get a sense of, Lake, when he senses he's onto something, that look of glee on his face, it really comes across, I think. I think all that stuff is great. It's interesting how much black and gray there is on the page in every panel for a book about Antarctica. And it's interesting. I mean, snow is maybe the hardest thing to do in comics. I don't know. But when it's snowing and snow is falling, I can't imagine how hard that is to convey. But he really... Yeah. The environments are really rich and frightening. And I love fiction about extreme environments. Not even just fiction, but like a desert or Antarctica is really appealing to me. So it kind of got me on those levels as well. I'm really keen to look at Volume 2. Yeah,
me too.
I'm not sure if I want to read the book or not. The source book novella.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I will get to it, because I haven't read Providence yet. Right. Because I've been waiting for a collection, which is maybe never going to come out.
I don't think it's going to come, yeah.
It's coming out in every other language, but not in English.
Yeah.
I've been kind of waiting for that, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to reread all the Lovecraft stuff before. And every time I go into a bookshop, if I see it, The Mountains of Madness, I mean, even before we talked about doing this, I'm always like, oh, that's the one I need to read that I haven't, the full-length one.
I'm going to read you the opening from the actual story, just to give you an idea of the style. I am forced into speech because men of science have refused to follow my advice without knowing why. It is altogether against my will that I tell my reasons for opposing this contemplated invasion of the Antarctic, with its vast fossil hunt and its wholesale boring and melting of the ancient ice caps. And I am the more reluctant because my warning may be in vain. And then he goes on to explain that, look, I've been there. I've seen these things. Please don't go. Please don't go. But it's an academic writing to his peers, saying your proposed exploration of the Antarctic is ill-advised. Yeah. Oh, by the way, a bunch of dudes died horribly.
Well, that's interesting, because that is kind of like the prologue that lets you know that bad stuff is coming. Because if you just told it chronologically, it'd be like 300 in the comic, 300 pages of boring and drilling and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, instead it's worked. The visual shock of those opening pages stays with you, as you were saying.
Yeah,
and then you have that creeping awareness of, oh, it's bad. It's going to get worse. I would have been very curious to see what Guillermo del Toro would have done with this, because he was going to make a movie with Tom Cruise. I remember.
Really?
The initial proposal was Tom Cruise was possibly attached.
Okay.
But it evaporated, and I'm sure Del Toro had all sorts of visual excess in mind, because that's the way he's an artist.
I wonder if this is tied up with that Universal Monster Universe thing, because Tom Cruise was in The Mummy, and Del Toro was supposed to do Creature from the Black Lagoon, and dropped out and ended up doing Shape of Water.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's something mixed in that
maybe
witch's brew of him and Tom Cruise working on the Mountains of Madness.
Maybe, but I think the idea of a bunch of scientists go to the Antarctic and meet an alien horror.
Oh,
and then and then the movie fell apart. Allegedly, the movie fell apart because Prometheus came out.
Okay,
and then they're like, "Oh no, we can't do it now because it's too similar."
It's too similar to The Thing. You just described The Thing.
I know, and any number of other horror movies.
Okay, so The Thing was based on Who Goes There originally. I'm wondering how close that was to... That couldn't have been written that many years after the original At the Mountains of Madness. Less than 20 years later, I would guess.
So that was 50s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The book was 50s. This is 1936, I want to say.
Okay.
I think so. It was originally serialized.
Right.
After being rejected a couple of times. And I've forgotten the name of the author of Who Goes There, but
Was it John Campbell? No, he was the editor of...
He was the editor of the magazine, It would have been part of that period of Lovecraft's initial ascendancy.
Yeah.
Post his posthumous fame as the father of all these different imitating writers, and then you've got these magazines capitalizing on his name. So I can absolutely see it being an influence. And then The Thing comes around in the 1980s after a remake of the original The Thing, and as you say, John Carpenter leaned heavily into the Lovecraftian aesthetic.
Yeah.
With the creature.
Yeah.
So these things come in waves, and now we're in the middle of another wave at the moment, I believe. Or maybe we're after the crest, because the Cthulhu Fungo Pop, the fluffy Cthulhus are, I think, on the way out now. I could be wrong.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
I think we hit peak with that.
It's hard to tell if there's a downturn. I wasn't aware there's an upturn until my son started showing me this stuff turning up. John Carpenter is interesting because I've been listening to this podcast about Halloween, and they are kind of describing him as the first fanboy filmmaker who was riffing on the movies he loved when he was younger, like Psycho.
What's the name of that podcast?
It's called... It just started.
Yep.
It's the sequel to In Voorhees We Trust with Meyer and Rust. And it's called In Myers We Trust with Geyer and Rust.
Okay.
And this is way off topic, but the first episode is 3.5 hours long. It's about the first movie. And the
first Halloween movie.
It's about the first Halloween movie.
Wow.
It's 3.5 hours. Well, they did a 0 episode when they did the Friday the 13th series, but... Yeah, they're kind of describing that how lots of the names were taken from other the names of characters all came from Psycho and various other things like that. So, so definitely he would have been. You could totally see him deliberately going after Lovecraft as.
And this is the era of the fan as fanatic.
Sure.
This is the era of the fan scholar, the fan magazine, the fan publication, and 1940s, 1950s really taking that ball and running with it that started in the 1930s. So you have this community of like-minded writers, thinkers, artists, and then you have the wave of filmmaking that follows that, and of course you have the comics coming up as well at the same time. But that period of amateur writing that transitions into professional careers is really interesting to me, and Lovecraft very much typified that, and he was aware of it. He talked about what being an amateur meant.
Right.
He talked about what it meant for him to be able to write these stories and get them published, but knowing that he's not going to make a living out of it. This is sort of he's doing it for the interest, the compulsion to write.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in that part of his approach to creating, and maybe it's an aspect of him that's a little more forgivable than the horrible bigotry and really nasty, terrible things he said and did.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to quickly shout out, because I genuinely think this is one of the best Lovecraft adaptations I've seen in any medium, really. Tanabe's done something quite spectacular here. But I wanted to shout out other comics that have riffed on Lovecraft, and we've talked about Alan Moore a fair bit, but I really liked his League of Gentlemen, Nemo Heart of Ice with Kevin O'Neill.
That's my only other exposure to At the Mountains of Madness.
Right.
Yeah.
I really like that one. I think it does well by the original story. Yeah. It's clearly Moore's story, though. Like, he's doing his thing.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Neill does little nods and winks to the Astounding magazine cover art from the original story. Like, there's little nods to that sort of style of illustration, which I really appreciate too. And it's quite funny in parts.
Yeah.
Lovecraft, not funny. Not a funny guy. I also wanted to shout out a great anthology from Self-Made Hero, publisher Self-Made Hero, and it's edited by Dan Lockwood. He writes a bunch of the stories in it too. The Lovecraft Anthology, Volume 1, very easy to find if you go by that. Self-Made Hero do some great stuff. I recently recorded an interview for Deconstructing Comics with Fionnuala Doran, all about the trial of Roger Casement, which also came out from Self-Made Hero, so I feel I should shout that out. And there's an artist in here. I was showing her work to Kumar before we started recording. Alice Duke. She illustrates a story called Dagon. She illustrates Dagon. And her stuff's amazing. I'm not saying... And Disraeli's in here too. And Disraeli's one of my favorite artists. He does the Call of Cthulhu. But like, Alice Duke, I'm not aware of her. I haven't seen her work before.
Well, in the bios at the back, it says she's kind of an up-and-coming...
Yeah.
So she's new to the industry, I think.
I think so too. And this is great stuff. You got Ian J. Coulbard, who's done a lot of Lovecraft adaptations. He's on a bit of a Lovecraft kick at the moment. He does the Dunwich Horror.
That's probably the story I enjoyed the most of Lovecraft stuff, that I found the creepiest and grossest, maybe.
And you've got Mark Stafford doing The Colour of Space, which is the one we both were... you're saying you wondered how people would actually do that.
How do you draw a color that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's just going with the people going bug-eyed and...
Right.
Lots of filth, lots of creepy crawlies and fungoid creatures and rotting bodies and... Yeah, there you go. That's how you do it. Mark Stafford. Was there any other ones that comes to mind for you, like Lovecraft and comics?
Corbin did a whole book of Lovecraft stuff.
He did.
Yeah. And that's all pretty fun adaptations of that stuff.
Because as part of his practice, doesn't he do like little plasticine?
He makes little models and then draws the models so he gets all the shadows right and stuff.
Yeah, I'm imagining now a workshop full of horrible Cthulhu beasties that he's put together.
Yeah, that's the one that springs to mind. I wish I could remember this other one. It was like a long time ago though, but it was a pretty good adaptation of Call of Cthulhu. Yeah.
All right, well, Mr. Corbin, God bless you. I think he'll appreciate that. He's gone full church, hasn't he?
No, you know what? I heard that rumor and I don't think it's true.
Oh, right, okay.
Because somebody said that he didn't allow his old work to be reprinted because he'd become very religious.
Yeah, I'd heard that.
We didn't want to have the nudity, but the new work is full of nudity.
Okay, well.
So I don't think that was true.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's reprinting Mutant World this year, which is also full of big boobs and stuff. So I don't know where that rumor got started or what. I remember hearing that too, but I don't know where it came from.
Very good. Well, I think we can leave it there.
Okay.
Before we conclude, what are you going to do, Kumar? I believe you have something to shout out. You've got a plug? A plug you'd like to make?
Okay, so I've got a prose novel. It's not a comic book. It's called Tanuja Ramachandran Hunter-Seeker. I think the distribution, it's supposed to be... You can get the ebook or...
Great, yeah.
The paperback. The paperback is the real version, in my mind.
Listeners, Kumar posted me a copy of his novel. It's beautiful looking paperback.
Yep.
Very happy to own a copy.
Yeah, it's kind of a pulp novel, so it's better to have the paperback, I think. So
is there a direct link for people to go to?
Amazon.com is the best.
Okay.
Just go on there and search for Tanuja Ramachandran Hunter Seeker. There's a lot of Dune riffs in there, including in the title. Or just through Google, you'll find something closer to home, probably. Technically, it is supposed to be available through almost every retailer.
And in terms of
special order.
In terms of stories, well, you've got all these sort of nods to spy fiction, adventure fiction.
Well, it's really it's really Don Pendleton's Mac Bolan Executioner.
Right.
And so when I started writing this book, this is a whole other podcast. My thing
you have to get better at the elevator pitch. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, okay. Basically, it was like, okay, you write what you know. Well, I don't know anything, but I've read a ton of Punisher comics.
Yep.
So I'll write an Executioner novel. And I read this book many years ago called The World's Worst Movies. And I don't remember which movie they were describing, but it was produced by these two, they were Eastern European producers. It was in the 50s, one of those 50s monster movies, like Robot Monster or something like that. They had very exotic names. But the names of the characters in the movie were like Joe Smith and, Bill and stuff like that. And there was a line in the review that was like, how disappointing that producers with such interesting names would create such boring characters. And I thought, that stuck in my mind. And I thought, okay. And I remember when I spoke to you about it, I don't know how much of you read it initially when I sent it to you, but you said something to me which was like, I like that you didn't make it easy.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is, I didn't want to make it easy, and that was so deliberate, and I'm glad that I got that reaction. So, that's kind of it. So it's just basically, imagine the Punisher, but it's like an Indian lady in a sari, and that's...
That's what I liked about it. That sort of that mashup approach I picked up on straight away, and it reminded me of the album Bombay the Hard Way by Dan the Automator and DJ Shadow, where they take all these Hindi movies and then they run them through this riffinator, and you got this great track.
And my approach, my whole thing was that everything was a mangrove root, and I was grabbing onto these mangrove roots so that I wouldn't drown.
Yep.
So anything, I was riffing on everything in there. Mostly Dune. I kept coming back to Dune a lot because I thought it was really inappropriate for Dune references to be in this Mac Bolan Executioner book. But yeah, I was just grasping onto anything I could to anchor my lack of confidence through the writing process. That was kind of what kept me upright, I think.
Great stuff. Go out there and get a copy, folks. Heartily recommend it. As Kumar mentioned, I got to see an early version of it, so I'm really glad to have a copy in my hands now, finally. As for myself, plug-wise, I've got a few things on the boil, but I also have a short comic coming out in Something Wicked, which is from the Sarjaz guys out in the UK, and a short little horror comic, and that will be out at the end of this month, I believe. At the time of recording, we're midway through October. So hopefully beginning of November you'll be able to get yourselves a copy.
Where?
Sarjaz is the website, so if you just you'll just be able to pick it up from there. Future Quake, Sarjaz, and then they've got this horror anthology called Something Wicked.
Okay.
And so it's the next issue of Something Wicked anthology. It'll be in there. And I'll probably speak more about that when it actually exists. Yeah. So I can probably credit everybody involved. So once again, folks, thanks for listening. Greetings from Melbourne, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness by Gou Tanabe is published by Dark Horse. Check the show notes for links to buy this book on Amazon, as well as Kumar's book, Tanuja Ramachandran, Hunter Seeker, and also to the Something Wicked 2019 anthology issue, in which Emmet's story appears. That link is from the Future Quake website. Deconstructing Comics will make a bit of money if you use the Amazon links from our site. Let us know what you think. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. Tweet us at DeconComics. Like our Facebook page or join our active Facebook group. We'd also really appreciate your supporting us with a pledge on Patreon. Our tiers start at just $2 a month. Pledge at least $4 a month to get our Patreon-only series Spider-Man 1963 and Tim Catches Up with the MCU. This weekend we'll publish our review of Thor Ragnarok. Go to patreon.com/deconcomics to join the fun. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Critiquing Comics will return in December. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week on Deconstructing Comics, Coom interviews the one, the only, Klaus Janson, famous for his ink work on various Frank Miller books. He's co-writing a new series from Image Comics called Sacred Creatures, and he'll be talking about that and more here next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.